Les agradecemos enormemente su presencia en la cuarta conferencia sobre erradicación sostenida del trabajo infantil. Y seguidamente daremos comienzo al panel Supply Chain y los dejo con la moderadora para comenzar. Muchas gracias.
Bienvenidos, good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. My name is Beata Andres, I'm from the ILO, and I will be the moderator of this panel called Supply Chains, Getting on Top of Complexity. I think we all recognize that supply chains are an engine of development. They are providing technology transfer. They also link to higher levels of production, but they also face decent work deficits. So the challenge of this panel tonight, this afternoon, is to unpack the complexity of supply chains. And we have a very distinguished panel here with us, and I will start with the Minister of Labor and Social Protection of Côte d'Ivoire, Jean-Claude Coissy, who has a lot of experience with supply chain in his own country and was also the first director of Côte d'Ivoire's investment program. I also have the honor to welcome Mrs. Annette Kramer. She is the Parliamentary State Secretary to the Federal Minister of Labor and Social Affairs of Germany. Mrs. Kramer is a lawyer and politician, and we are very honored to have you here with your vast experience on this panel. Welcome. I would also like to welcome Mr. Corel Goutor, the Director of Labor and Mobility of the Director General of Employment of the European Commission. Mr. Corel was involved in the preparation and implementation of the EU's social agenda. And again, your experience, I think, will add an important aspect to this discussion. We also have here with us a very distinguished trade unionist, Ruan Subasinghe, also a lawyer of the International Transport Workers Federation. Ruan is an advocate also at international organizations like the ILO and the OECD. Our next speaker then is Andrew Forrest, the founder of the Walk Free Foundation and the former chief executive of Fortescue Metals, one of the biggest mining companies of Australia. And he is now fully dedicated to the fight against modern slavery. We have Marcela Manubens, the Global Vice President for Social Impact of Unilever, very much involved in women's empowerment issues as well, and we are very honored to have you here with us. And we have Timothy Ryan of the Solidarity Center, a global NGO and network, a great expert on supply chains, and he also manages Asia programs of the Solidarity Center. And we have Didier Bergeret, the Director of Sustainability of the Consumer Goods Forum, and very passionate about partnerships. A very distinguished panel, and without much ado, I want to go into the debate. I would like to all point you to the conference application. If you have a mobile phone, you can ask questions to our panelists through the conference application. You have to go to our panel, and at the end you will see the speakers. At the end you can post your question in English, French, or Spanish. So please join the debate on your conference application and post your questions. Now let us start the first round of our debate. And we would like to start with a discussion on collaboration and partnerships with regards to supply chains. And Monsieur le Ministre, I will start with you. Could you please tell us more about the experience of Côte d'Ivoire in working with a wide range of stakeholders to address child labor in cocoa growing communities? How have these private-public partnerships helped to address and to eliminate child labor? Minister, the floor is yours.
Je voudrais vous dire merci et vous remercier déjà de nous donner cette occasion de participer à une rencontre de qualité qui, nous espérons, va nous permettre d'avancer dans ce que nous recherchons, à savoir éliminer le travail des enfants et aller jusqu'à l'élimination aussi de la traite des personnes. Concernant la question que vous avez posée tout à l'heure, au niveau du gouvernement de Côte d'Ivoire, nous avons le souci de travailler avec tous les partenaires et particulièrement ceux du secteur privé. Avec les partenaires du secteur privé, nous avons engagé un certain nombre d'éléments dont le suivi du travail des enfants sur toute la chaîne. Et à ce niveau, nous avons fait des progrès puisque nous avons un observatoire qui nous permet de faire ce suivi. Et cet observatoire qui avait commencé dans quelques régions est en train de s'étendre au niveau de jusqu'au village, jusqu'à des villages en Côte d'Ivoire. En dehors de cela, nous avons aussi un programme qui porte sur l'éducation. Au niveau de l'éducation, les partenaires privés nous aident à construire des écoles, à remettre à niveau certaines écoles et nous aident également à faire un meilleur suivi du travail des enfants pour arriver à l'élimination. Au niveau toujours du partenariat, nous avons un partenariat aussi avec des organisations qui nous permet, comme le BIT justement, qui nous permet d'améliorer notre législation et notre réglementation en matière d'élimination du travail des enfants. Et à ce niveau-là, je puis dire que, par exemple, aujourd'hui, nous avons une législation, une réglementation qui nous permettent de faire la part des choses entre le travail dissocialisant qui permet aux enfants de marquer un intérêt pour certains types de travaux et les pires formes de travail des enfants qui doivent être éliminées, d'abord parce qu'ils empêchent les enfants d'aller à l'école et ensuite parce qu'ils compromettent ainsi leur avenir. Nous sommes donc dans cette dynamique-là avec le secteur privé et ce que nous envisageons dans cette dynamique-là, c'est déjà, au lieu de rester au niveau du cycle primaire, d'aller dans le préscolaire. Parce que si vous voulez, lorsqu'on apprécie le travail des enfants, on peut vous dire un enfant qui est au champ travaille. Mais non, s'il est au champ parce qu'il a moins de 6 ans et qu'il ne peut pas aller à l'école avant 6 ans parce que le préscolaire n'est pas développé dans le secteur rural, même le bébé alors serait considéré comme un travailleur parce qu'il est obligé d'aller au champ et c'est là-bas que les parents peuvent le surveiller. Donc ce sont des choses que nous regardons ensemble. Nous souhaiterions que le privé s'intéresse davantage au développement du préscolaire parce que lorsque nous aurons des crèches et un préscolaire qui prend la toute petite enfance, c'est-à-dire la toute petite section, la moyenne section avant d'arriver à la grande section, on sait que l'enfant est pris en charge à tous ces niveaux-là. Nous souhaitons également que le secteur privé nous aide à accroître l'employabilité des jeunes dans nos pays parce que c'est important. Si tout le monde pense que l'enfant doit faire l'enseignement général pour réussir sa vie alors qu'il y a des formations professionnelles et techniques pour lesquelles il a plus d'aptitudes, on risque de sortir cet enfant du système de formation alors qu'il a des aptitudes ailleurs. Notre souhait, c'est donc que le privé nous aide dans ces éléments-là et nous aide dans les chantiers écoles, dans les stages, dans une meilleure appréhension de la formation professionnelle. Les métiers d'hier, si on continue de former à des métiers d'hier, on compromet l'avenir des enfants. Si on les forme aux métiers d'aujourd'hui sans envisager les métiers de demain, on compromet l'avenir des enfants. Notre souhait, c'est que le privé étant déjà plus avancé dans ce secteur, nous puissions ensemble avec lui regarder de l'avant et donner à nos enfants un avenir qui soit plus radieux que celui qu'on leur fabrique actuellement. Merci.
Many thanks, Minister, for this overview. And I think many of your private sector partners are in the audience this afternoon. I hope they have heard your message that we need to focus also on the young cohort of children, which we have seen in our latest estimates. It seems this group of children, the numbers of child laborers, unfortunately, have not declined as rapidly as we would like to see. Now, let me turn to the State Secretary, Mrs. Kammer. Under German presidency, the G7 and G20 leaders adopted a declaration with very substantive elements on supply chains. Could you tell us more about the importance of those declarations and the opportunities they bring to the fight against child labor and forced labor? Please.
Ja, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, vielleicht ein Ausgangssatz vorab gestellt. Kinderarbeit ist leider immer noch ein Gräuel dieser Welt, dieser Gesellschaften, und insbesondere die Industriestaaten müssen ihr ein erhebliches Mehr an Arbeit leisten als in der Vergangenheit. Aber lassen Sie mich berichten über einerseits den G7 und den G20. Vielleicht zunächst einmal zum G7. Ich denke, wir haben hier einen wichtigen Fortschritt erreicht. Und zwar sind im Rahmen dieses G7s folgende Dinge festgehalten worden. Zunächst einmal sind bessere Arbeitsbedingungen in Lieferketten als ein Handlungsschwerpunkt festgehalten worden. Das ist wichtig. Etwas Zweites ist, und ich denke, das ist relativ neu, G7 ruft die Privatwirtschaft auf, ihren Sorgfaltspflichten innerhalb der Unternehmen nachzukommen auf dem Gebiet der Menschenrechte. Und ein dritter Punkt ist, G7 unterstützt nachdrücklich die UN-Leitprinzipien für Wirtschaft und Menschenrechte und begrüßt deren Umsetzung durch substanzielle nationale Aktionspläne. Aber im Rahmen von G7 sind nicht nur diese abstrakten Dinge festgehalten worden, sondern man hat auch über konkrete Dinge geredet. Action for Fair Products. Und eine der Umsetzungen ist der sogenannte Vision Zero Fonds zur Verbesserung des Arbeitsschutzes, der letztlich durch die ILO umgesetzt wird. Vielleicht ein Prinzip dieses Vision Zero Funds: eine Förderung ist nur möglich, wenn es klare Verpflichtungen der Regierung einerseits gibt und der Sozialpartner andererseits über Maßnahmen. Und ein erstes Initiatorprojekt ist in Myanmar durchgeführt worden. Wir sind in Äthiopien dabei. Eine zweite Geschichte. Lassen Sie mich weiter zum G20 kommen. Leider haben wir dort noch nicht den Konkretisierungsgrad, den wir haben wollen. Trotzdem glauben wir, dass auch dort Fortschritte erzielt wurden. G20 sagt Folgendes: Nachhaltige Lieferketten sind eine Herausforderung. Wie gesagt, es bedarf der Konkretisierung. Wir als deutsches Arbeitsministerium wollen deshalb weiter an dieser Konkretisierung arbeiten. Das heißt einerseits, dass es zur Erfüllung der nationalen Aktionspläne kommt, dass diese Selbstverpflichtungen auch durchgesetzt werden, dass es eine Unterstützung des Vision Zero Funds gibt, dass das Thema der existenzsicheren Löhne aufgegriffen wird, dass es Beschwerdemöglichkeiten der Arbeit und Arbeitnehmerinnen gibt und aber auch Unterstützung der Unternehmen bei der Erstellung nachhaltiger Lieferketten. Ich denke, das sind die wichtigsten Dinge, die von G7 und G20 zu berichten sind.
Many thanks, Mrs. Kramer. This was, I think, very encouraging to hear, very important for all of us in this room today. Let me now turn to Andrew. We have heard quite a lot about the role of business. Andrew, can you tell us how a business leader like yourself came invested on these issues? What is motivating you? And what did you do in your company to address child labor and forced labor?
Okay, thank you, Beate. Ladies and gentlemen, I have only a very personal story to share with you, and I'm sure all of us know that hearing is involuntary, and what you hear is at the command of someone else, and that's really how my journey started. It was where a daughter of mine travelled to Kathmandu, Nepal, and she worked amongst orphanages where we thought, and we supported her, were legitimate orphanages where children could be protected, could be given an education, and then given a real start in life, such as we've heard our ministers speak about this afternoon. Unfortunately, on closer analysis, these orphanages acted as sweeper systems for little children to be trafficked from Nepal, where they had a skin colour which was attractive to the pedophile markets in the Middle East. And they were trafficked through India, and complicit in this was, of course, airlines, bus links, organisations who are all businesses. And we found that profoundly shocking. And we travelled back to Nepal to visit an orphanage where there was a legitimate attempt, where children who'd been rescued from slavery had often found their way back from countries where they were treated despicably, but were prepared to give the human race another chance. And this was a large orphanage in Nepal, and I was being fortunate enough to be taken around this orphanage, and we started with the most confident and older children first. And as we went down through the ranks, not necessarily the age, but we came to the dormitories where children had found their way back to Kathmandu and had been kindly brought by some blessed soul to this one legitimate orphanage. And these children ranked in ages from between 6 and 12. So you can imagine how young they were when they were trafficked out of Kathmandu through India. And there's one little girl there, ladies and gentlemen, who at the end of this long row of beds, there were beds on either side of this long corridor style of a room, and beds on the other side. And some of the children seemed content, scribbling in their little books or playing with small toys. Others were very quiet. But there was a little girl down the end of the room who just rocked from side to side and whimpered gently. And I was quite taken by this little person. I asked the matron if I might approach her. And as we walked slowly down between the little beds, the matron said that this child had complained that she'd been taken to a land where men wore long white dresses and she could no longer speak. Such was the trauma on her little mind. And I approached her like any father would, with care and kindness on my face. But as my footsteps came closer to her, she stopped rocking. And she looked up at the approach of a male adult with such horror and such terror and disgust in her eyes that she let out a scream which I will never, ever, ever forget. And as I slowly backed away, I began to understand the horrors of child trafficking. And I'd started a large business at this point. I'd begun to resolve that I would step down from this large business and devote myself to fighting modern slavery, but then my journey was child trafficking and child enslavement. But I just thought I should check my own supply chains, just make sure, ladies and gentlemen, my own hands were clean. But surely as an Australian company with the strictest of governance, with a government which outlawed slavery, with a government which had a supporting rule of law, a minimum wage, that Fortescue, my large company, would be safe. We had around 3,500 suppliers. When we went through our supply chains, and this is why I will always argue till the day I die for transparency, when we went through and we started to push away the cloaks of the corporate veils of our supply chains, we came across slavery again and again and again. And these were companies which were supplying not only my company, but companies right throughout the Fortune 500 of companies in the world, like mine. We all have slavery in our supply chains. They were supplying governments all over the world. They have slavery in their supply chains. And so I wish to lend my voice as a businessman and as a person which I hope you will listen to say, slavery is a human condition. It is a choice we make. It is not AIDS, it is not a terrible natural disaster inflicted upon us, it is within our control. It is within the control of all of you and the leaders on this panel. And there are basic steps we can take that will protect those little boys and girls, and so you may never hear that scream of terror which still haunts me today. And that is what motivates me, Beata.
Thank you, Andrew. I think your voice is loud and clear. Let us now turn to Ruan. Ruan, we've heard just now from Andrew what you can do to address child labor, slavery, forced labor from the top of the supply chain. But from you, I'd like to hear, what do we have to do to empower workers, small producers, those who are at the bottom of the supply chain, and what can workers' organizations do?
Thank you, Beata. Good afternoon, friends. Absolutely. I mean, both child labor and forced labor are key trade union issues, and for many years we've been trying to push for change from the bottom up. And I think we do this primarily in 4 ways. And I think it goes without saying that organizing is perhaps the most effective tool to tackle forced labor. Freedom of association is an enabling right. And I think it follows from that where freedom of association is respected, you are less likely to find slavery, child labor, or other unacceptable practices. Unions have been at the forefront of organizing vulnerable workers, be they women workers, migrant workers, or workers in the informal sector. The ITF, my organization, has been trying to organize fishers. I mean, this is a constituency where global union density in the fishing sector stands at 1%. And the fishing industry, as we know, is unfortunately prone to various decent work deficits, including forced labor. So that's organizing. A second aspect, I would say, is we engage in advocacy and campaigning for change. Education International, for example, the education sector Global Union Federation has a program called Out of Work and Into School campaign, where together with the help of their national unions aim to create child labor-free zones, and they do this while campaigning for free public and compulsory education, because the two go hand in hand. The ITF, my organization, has also used the ILO supervisory mechanisms to highlight some of these issues. We filed a forced labor representation against Thailand for abuses in their fishing industry, and as a result of that, we can report on some serious progress. The government of Thailand has engaged with us in an extremely sincere manner, and also thanks to ILO technical assistance, we are seeing some serious progress, although there is still a lot to do. We're also at the forefront of campaigning for the universal ratification of the Forced Labor Protocol and other relevant sectoral instruments, including Convention 188 on work and fishing, because we do think that a sectoral approach can also help eradicate forced and child labor from particular sectors. Although, 188 only covers a very small section of the supply chain, wild catch fishing. Unfortunately, we also do think that there are significant governance gaps at the international and national levels when it comes to regulating supply chains. So we have been campaigning for an ILO instrument, an ILO convention on decent work in global supply chains, and we're currently participating at the UN Human Rights Council for a potential binding treaty on transnational corporations and human rights. The third way, and in the interest of time I won't give further examples, but we assist and support victims of trafficking and forced labor, while also trying to hold companies to account for forced and child labor violations in their supply chains. And we're always on the lookout for strategic litigation options and capital strategies in order to enforce these points. And finally, I would say the fourth way that we engage on these issues is through social dialogue. As a colleague from the German government highlighted, the G20 declaration from this summer encouraged governments to sign global framework agreements with the global union federations, and the bilateral mechanisms contained in the GFAs for due diligence implementation can be a real force for change. And needless to say, we also take part in various multi-stakeholder activities, including Alliance 8.7 and the ACT initiative on living wages. And I'll leave it there, but just to say that, we do all of this with very limited budgets and occasionally in very unfavorable legislative and practical environments. And we really need governments to guarantee an enabling environment for us to be able to carry out this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Woon, and I would just like to underline that ITF is extremely effective in all the things you do, including high-level advocacy. We will come back to the governance issues in our second round, but let me just continue now with Mr. Correll from the European Commission. We've just heard various examples now, Mr. Correll, fishing, mining, cocoa, and in all of those we've looked at the collaborative approaches. Could you tell us something about the European Commission and also how EU member states promote collaborative efforts?
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias a la República Argentina y a la Organización Internacional del Trabajo por haber organizado esta conferencia. Y efectivamente, a nivel de la Unión Europea, el tema del trabajo infantil es fundamental, es preocupante. Todo lo que está alrededor de las cadenas globales de suministro, está claro que si no se garantizan unas condiciones de trabajo que sean equitables y que sean justas, lo cual por supuesto incluye la prohibición del trabajo infantil, está claro que eso tiene efectos muy detrimentales. Detrimentales en primer lugar respecto a la justicia social, por supuesto, pero también respecto a la competencia. Es decir, en caso de que haya empresas que no respeten estos estándares mínimos, por supuesto tiene una situación de competencia desleal respecto a aquellas que sí que lo hacen. A nivel de Unión Europea hay dos pistas de acción principales. Una es el apoyo que la Unión Europea como organización, pero también obviamente en colaboración con sus Estados miembros, presta a todos los esfuerzos multilaterales. Y cuando hablamos de multilateralidad en este ámbito de las cadenas globales de suministro, nos referimos, por supuesto, a la OIT, que tiene un papel fundamental, ya sea durante las conferencias internacionales del trabajo, como la del 2016, donde se adoptaron las conclusiones sobre trabajo decente en estas cadenas de suministro, y donde yo creo que la Unión Europea, como organización y junto a sus Estados miembros, tuvo un papel importante. También me debería referir a la ministra alemana, Annette Kramp, ya lo ha hecho, a la presidencia del G20 de Alemania, donde efectivamente uno de los bloques de las conclusiones fue el de las cadenas globales de suministro, y donde, como participante en las discusiones que tuvieron lugar, tengo que decir que no fueron fáciles. La ministra nos decía que a Alemania le habría gustado ir más lejos, a nosotros también nos habría gustado ir más lejos, pero hubo un momento en que parecía que iríamos mucho menos lejos. O sea que yo creo que efectivamente este esfuerzo multilateral es importante. El segundo ámbito en el que la Unión Europea es activa es en el ámbito de la política comercial. Hasta hace unos años la política comercial de la Unión Europea, y como ustedes saben, la Unión Europea tiene competencia exclusiva en materia de comercio internacional, era puramente comercial. Pero desde hace unos años se incluyen en todos los acuerdos comerciales de la Unión Europea con los demás países. Por ejemplo, ahora estamos negociando un acuerdo comercial con los países del Mercosur, que es importante, por supuesto, para la República Argentina. Se introducen cláusulas de lo que llamamos de desarrollo sostenible. Y estas cláusulas son importantes porque, en lo que se refiere a los aspectos de empleo y sociales, incluyen los estándares fundamentales de la OIT. Y eso yo creo que es muy importante por dos razones. La primera razón es que se incorpora una dimensión social, una dimensión ética, como decía antes, a la política comercial, lo cual hace avanzar también la agenda de esta dimensión ética. Y, por supuesto, entre los estándares fundamentales de la OIT se incluye la erradicación del trabajo infantil, pero, por otro lado, se hace de una forma en la que un bloque regional como es Europa, no impone sus estándares al resto del mundo. Lo que hace es apropiarse, digamos, de los estándares que ya son universales, puesto que son estándares de la Unión Europea. Y este es un tema que produce resultados. Yo creo que es un ejercicio en el que la OIT y la Unión Europea trabajan juntos, y es un ejercicio en el que se consigue que se vaya ampliando, también por este mecanismo, que se vaya ampliando la ratificación de estos convenios internacionales que encapsulan, digamos, los estándares fundamentales, entre los que se encuentra, como decía antes, la prohibición del trabajo infantil. Y como tema transversal que ocupa todo esto, y nos lo decía Ruan antes, es la importancia del diálogo social. Y es el diálogo social que, en el caso de las cadenas globales, tiene que ser global. No basta un diálogo social a nivel nacional, puesto que, por definición, efectivamente, las cadenas globales son transnacionales. O sea, este es un elemento que quería subrayar. Pero me gustaría terminar repitiendo o retomando las palabras de Andrew Forrest. La impresión que yo tengo es que la sociedad acepta las prácticas injustas cuando no las ve. Y si aceptamos hoy que siga existiendo el trabajo infantil, el trabajo de esclavitud, al que se refería Andrew Forrest, es porque estamos aquí sentados y no los vemos. Y yo creo que eventos como este, conferencias internacionales como estas, son fundamentales para darle visibilidad a esta lacra, a este fenómeno, y estoy convencido que si aumentamos la visibilidad de esta desgracia para el mundo, la sociedad no se quedará indiferente y podremos luchar con más eficacia para combatir el trabajo infantil. Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Thank you very much. Thank you, and we will continue discussing the importance of partnerships in the European Union in the afternoon as one of the side events. But thank you also for highlighting the importance of social dialogue. I think that needs to be said here in this particular panel. Now, let me turn to Marcella from Unilever. Marcella, the SDGs set ambitious targets. We've heard it this morning. Unilever is known for setting ambitious targets, so I will ask you an ambitious question. We all know that child labor and forced labor often occur deep down in the supply chain, and that's where often women work, or girls. So can you tell us more about how Unilever is addressing this challenge? How to address child labor and forced labor deep down in the supply chain?
Thank you, Beata. Buenos días, buenas tardes. Es un placer para mí estar en Argentina, en el país que nos está hospedando y donde nací y crecí. It is for me also a privilege to be together in this room with all of you. If we are in this room, it's because we care and because we are advancing these issues. So how do we do it from a perspective of responsible business? It's just not one issue, it's a journey on how do we work on this. So first and foremost, we believe that human rights and the respect and promotion of human rights is the foundation of our business, is how we want to do business. So we have invested in really articulate our strategy as part of the business that we do. 2014, we expanded and we clearly addressed not only our strategy, but specific goals and targets on how we wanted to address human rights. So we created within our strategy, fairness in the workplace is all about the respect and promotion of human rights, the reference to women's rights, women's opportunities, addressing what we call the tripod of women's empowerment, the rights, the skills to succeed, and the opportunities. And addressing the third pillar, that is inclusive business models. As it was addressed and referred early on today, these issues are forced labor, child labor, are intimately linked to issues of poverty and abuse. So when we look into the execution, the implementation of this strategy, certainly we have a program in terms, like many of the companies do, in articulated clear codes, clear policies, anchored in all the international conventions, the Universal Declaration, the USLP, the SDGs. But it's really in the execution and how we work on these issues, particularly the issue of collaboration. When we look into partnership, private-public partnerships, we work really together with what we call critical partners, where we hear a different point of view, where we hear a different model, and we come together to address it. And the issue that Beata asked me also to address is from the perspective of women's issues. I mean, when you go down the supply chain, certainly women and girls are at the core of many of the abuses. We look into what is happening nowadays with political, economic, social, environmental issues. There is this borderless workforce that Andrew was referring to that allow abusers, to take, vulnerable individuals and traffic them into the supply chain. So, but women are particularly, and little girls and girls are particularly vulnerable. Some years ago, we, learning from the conditions in Africa, not only we task ourselves to address the problems, but most significantly to say, let us create a program on safety for women and girls and really address those issues, but from a systemic point of view. It's not just about the conditions or providing, certainly education is critical, but providing programs that keep the girls safe. What happened after school, what the parents are working or the mothers are working in the facility, what is the conscientization that we need to work together with the government, the police force, the hospitals, everybody to really work together to prevent these abuses. So that program was, the focus also of review and of UN Women, and we are working together with them, not only to do it in the countries where we did, but now expand it and bring it to other parts of the world, like what we are doing in India and expanding in Africa. But we also work with other critical partners like Oxfam. And in 2011-12, after the passing of the UNGPs, we partnered with Oxfam and we asked them to look into our operations in Southeast Asia. Is perhaps what you would describe as an independent review under the UNGPs. And out of that body of work, of independent work, a whole observations and recommendations of issues that we thought that they were in good order. And it was that opportunity of working together with an organization also, or like Oxfam, or working through grievance mechanisms through the unions that throughout our business, that give us the opportunity to also tackle these issues. For us, as I said before, these issues are interrelated, and this is the reason why we need to tackle the root causes. But tackling the root causes cannot be done just by one company or working in partnership. It has to be done by the industry. Otherwise, we address the issue in one place and we transfer to another location. So we work, Unilever has been behind the work and working together with the industry in the Consumer Goods Forum to really establish, which is a very large organization of business, both manufacturers and retailers, to really establish our social sustainability ambition, that is the eradication of forced labor from supply chains. And it's this body of work, working together with NGOs, working with the UK High Commissioner on the eradication of modern slavery, is this partnership that is really helping to advance the issue of bringing awareness. We are working with Cardinal Nichols and a publication in England, the Evening Standard, to really put in the public space all this, the awareness of all the abuses that take place. They are business across that touch our lives every single day, your lives, our lives. They are abuses that can be prevented, as Andrew also reminded us and the minister have reminded us early on. And I think that only by bringing that awareness and making solutions part of all of us is that we can really improve and make progress. Perhaps the other activity that I would like to call upon attention is to really, as it was called this morning, to have by Kailash, very concrete initiatives. For instance, in global supply chains, there are basic principles that for workers paying for a recruitment fee when they move, migrant workers, when they go from one location to the other, eradicating these practices is at the core of stopping the abuses that we see. Migrant labor is something that is good and necessary, but just in good conditions, and making sure that we work together with governments who send, workers overseas, the recipient government, working with civil society, grievance mechanisms, and business in those communities is the only way that we believe that we can get this done. And that's how we are working, Beata. I mean, we take every single opportunity to really address these principles and promote them and making part of the business as usual.
Thank you very much, Marcela. And I think your focus on industry-wide collaboration, I think that was an important point that I think resonates with other business as well. It's often said that this is a pre-competitive field, child labor and forced labor. And it should certainly not give any business a competitive advantage. So thank you for highlighting this, and also for pointing out that when we talk about supply chains, we also have to look at labor supply chains, the recruitment practices, where are the workers coming from, how they are recruited. Thank you very much. Now let us turn to civil society. Tim, the Solidarity Center has a lot of experience in coalition building. You've also worked very closely with trade unions. Can you give us an example of such coalition building and what it teaches us?
Certainly, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be on the panel and to be part of the program today. I also want to say that one example of two that I'll give briefly is that I am the Asia Director for the Solidarity Center in Washington, the international organization of the trade union movement of the United States, but I also am here representing the Global March Against Child Labor along with other board members of that organization, a membership organization and network created by Kailash Satyarthi that explicitly contains both NGOs and trade unions in its operation and on its board. So there are good examples out there of the ways in which trade unions and NGOs can work together. I wanted to offer one example actually that touches on the industry that Ruan had just mentioned, an example of a practical, on-the-ground experience of addressing both trafficking and child labor in the seafood and fishing industries in Thailand. And this is an example that goes both to a practical level but also to a broader policy and practice level, and is an example where you have to use all of the different tools and the different resources that both trade unions and NGOs have at their disposal, working together in order to really have an impact. So what I'd like to describe here is in 2008 was the first research that the Solidarity Center published a report on the labor violations in the shrimp and seafood industry in Bangladesh and Thailand. And subsequently, a real focus and a spotlight was put on that industry and the supply chain, which is clearly much more difficult and much more complex to get at than, say, a garment factory in a country manufacturing for a major brand where inspections are done all the time and it's a fixed physical plant, you know, with a fixed workforce that you can address. The combination of resources in Thailand came in the form of the State Enterprise Workers Confederation, state enterprise workers, so not even in the private sector, who recognized that the issues that migrant workers were facing, especially from Burma, in their own country, was, more broadly speaking, a social justice issue, but it also really impacted on the basic standards that were impacting Thai workers in general. Even though it didn't apply directly to the state enterprise workers, they saw this as an issue of broader social justice that needed to be addressed. At that time, a new organization of Burmese migrant workers was formed, the Migrant Worker Rights Network, and under Thai law, which is incredibly restrictive and incredibly difficult, let's put it this way, for both labor standards to be maintained and also for workers to organize, you know, in terms of looking at ILO Convention 87 and collective bargaining, ILO Convention 98. Even within that difficult environment, with the assistance of the Thai trade union movement, the Burmese migrant workers were able to start organizing within an association structure and have over 5,000 members today that are basically advocating for their members' interests within Thailand, now also with the government in Burma and Myanmar, but also provide legal assistance and legal remedies for their members, which as a function of sort of direct pressure on companies began to move companies into a stance or a situation where they were willing to negotiate and address some of these labor issues as opposed to taking having to go a legal route. This pressure for change is, I think, one of the sort of ground-up basic elements of this much broader and bigger picture that we see today in terms of focus on the fisheries industries in East Asia. But it also, again, requires the opportunity and the leverage and the tools that the trade union movement externally can bring to the table. And Ruan mentioned this in the context of the complaint that the International Transport Federation brought to the ILO, and also the trade pressure and trade law pressure that was brought by the AFL-CIO in filing with the U.S. Trade Representative a petition against Thailand under the Generalized System of Preferences law in the United States, which requires beneficiaries of tariff benefits to basically respect and uphold core ILO labor standards. So this combination of different pieces and levers is an example where when you get all of these different sort of tools working together, there's an opportunity to make some concrete change on the ground. And I just also, to kind of return to the issue for a moment, I'd just like to highlight the idea that here you had, you know, a Thai trade union organization working with a Burmese NGO for a common issue that they both saw as important for basic social justice for workers across the board in Thailand. So, you know, that's one of those examples that always try to look for how you can take those pieces and put them together and make them work in other contexts as well.
Thank you very much, Tim. I think a very powerful example. Now we start getting some questions already from the audience through the conference application. I would also encourage all of you to use the app if you want to post a question. But before turning to those, I'd like to give Didier the floor. Didier, consumer demand goods and services that are free of child labor and forced labor. So what can consumer-facing companies do? Can you tell us more also about what the Consumer Goods Forum is doing?
Yeah, as Marcella was mentioning it, industry-wide cooperation is technically essential to tackle endemic issues and problems that we face. The Consumer Goods Forum, we of course work a lot on food safety, and we make sure that all our companies respect certain protocols, but we also commit to sustainability impact management, be it on environmental or be it on social. One element of the Consumer Goods Forum is that we are a CEO-led organization, a very big organization of 400 members with 56 CEOs from Unilever, Walmart, Coca-Cola, Nestle, and other companies, just paving the way for our industry to adopt best practices and make sure that we drive positive change. There is a lot of discussion about the future of work, but our CEOs really do believe that it's absolutely not credible to speak about the future of work as long as we have unacceptable practices from the past still happening in our supply chains. And yet, the reality is that despite all the efforts we do, we still have more slaves than ever, according to the recent figures of the ILO and the Work Free Foundation. So there is something we do wrong. So in terms of assuming our responsibility, our CEOs have been passing a couple of months ago the first industry resolution against forced labor, the first industry resolution against forced labor. And believe it or not, we're still, I think, the only industry to have publicly said and committed to fight together to eradicate forced labor. Yet the reality as well is that it's nice to say such thing, but what exactly do you do? What exactly do you tackle? And how can you collectively make a difference? And this is where this industry-wide cooperation between retailers and manufacturers really help in highlighting what are the key problems and making them understandable by consumers. Because consumers still believe that forced labor is an issue of the past, but don't realize that today, as Marcella was mentioning, many people still pay to get their job. And that's unacceptable. They get indebted for 2 years, but recruitment fees are one concrete expression of forced labor today. Passport retention is still also happening everywhere, where despite all the audits we do, we can not only by ourselves change those cultures, those practices that are anchored in mindsets and that translate forced labor into endemic issues of our contemporary world. So what we did as well, apart from compiling all the best practices that you can find here from 17 of our members, we tried to synthesize what we want to do and what we want to achieve, notably to support SDG 8.7 and make sure that we, of course, uphold all the relevant ILO core conventions. And in this case, our approach has been less to be consumer-facing, but more worker-facing. Because you have to realize as well that many workers today don't even know that they are trapped in situations of forced labor. And whenever we go and audit our factories or our productions, our agricultural sites, it's difficult to identify who's in a situation of forced labor or not, because the issues are, as said, endemic. So we came up with 3 principles, 3 priority principles, obviously all derived from the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, but certainly from the ILO core conventions on decent work. And they are very simple, but we hope they can contribute to driving positive change worldwide. The first and foremost is every worker should have freedom of movement. Second is that no worker should pay for a job. And the third is that no worker should be indebted or coerced to work. It's actually making the ILO core conventions worker-friendly, because they probably don't read your conventions. Most people here know them, but workers on the ground, they don't know what's the situation and if they are trapped in a situation of forced labor. So what we are trying to do as consumer-facing industry is really to get a synthetic version of everything that we want to have achieved by 2025 or 2030, making sure that those three principles are effectively integrated in the DNA of our companies when it comes to managing our own operations and our very numerous workers, but certainly as well to guarantee that the impact we have on supply chains is about the implementation of those principles to really put an end to these unacceptable practices that really will taint in a very bad way the future of work as long as we have not solved them.
Thank you very much, Didier, and also thank you for highlighting the integration of core labor standards. Child labor and forced labor, they're often linked to discrimination, to the lack of freedom of association, collective bargaining, and other human rights violations. So thank you for pointing this out. Now let me turn to the questions, and the first question I'd like to pick here is something I'd like to start with Andrew and Marcella, maybe. What practical actions can governments take to help business fight against child labor? So let us start with you, Andrew, and then Marcella, if that's all right. What practical actions can governments take? What would you like to see them take?
Okay, thank you. Governments can show leadership. Business will not front-run governments. It is a very good way to get yourself out of business if you get in front of government policy. And even if you try and lead, say, a forced labour issue within an economy, if the government isn't supporting you, then you're going to find yourself alone and friendless. Now, all governments state that they are against forced labour, that they're against modern slavery, that they're against child labour, but then again, we have to put that into action. And what we've found in Australia, and we've witnessed it in California and the United Kingdom and other places, that a simple Modern Slavery Act, which we in business, I'm speaking on behalf of my own multi-billion-dollar business, but also the multi-billion-dollar businesses which we speak to all over the world. We in business do not want to front-run our government, but we want our governments to act. We want our governments to keep a level playing field of business. If we keep a level playing field, we're going to have market-driven economics which provide goods and services at the best possible value within a fair system. And what I'm talking about with the Modern Slavery Act is where we're all on the same playing field and we allow the consumers and the public to see what we're doing about keeping our supply chains clean. And if all of us in business know that there's a minimum standard that we'll publish once a year, what actions we have taken to keep our supply chains free of child labour and forced labour, then we know that everyone else in our industry and in our economy will be doing the same, and we're all on the same playing field. And our consumers and our customers know for sure that what they are consuming is not making them the unwitting driver of modern slavery or child labour. We've heard from some great companies this afternoon and great advocates of groups of companies. And I say this, ladies and gentlemen, we in business want a level playing field. We want transparency in our supply chains, and we need governments to lead that and ask us for our approval for a Modern Slavery Act, and you will hear from businesses around the world loud approval.
Great, thank you, Andrew. And I think transparency here is a key word. We actually got another question here on specific the case of Australia on legislation to obligate corporates for due diligence on human rights. But we can come back to the regulation part in a moment. Let's hear from Marcella. Okay. What should governments do? Well,
you know, I echo what Andrew said. Transparency is critical. But there are certainly, when we look into, from the perspective of the governments, there has been progress. But if we look at the UNGPs and we look at the responsibility of protect, and we unpack that for specifically the issues that we are addressing today, there is a lot that can be done. First of all, in the clarity of standing and principles, an action plan that it can advance the agenda. The ratification of the conventions that it translates into local legislation that really enables all the actors, business, unions, civil society, to really work together to address this issue. Public procurement. I think that many governments right now have started driving, not only asking business to address these issues, but are role modeling, but really targeting these issues, and it's critical. As companies, we do due diligence. I'm not a crime-fighting organization, but certainly we do our due diligence, and we need to draw from that international framework and for the local legislation to really be able to do it. And a good example of this is the work that we are doing in UK. You know, our company and business were highly supportive of the Modern Slavery Act. The UK government, the way to tackle this issue was to appoint a high commissioner. There is a commissioner for the eradication of modern slavery, Kevin Highland. We work very close in addressing, not only addressing the issue, but really developing a dialogue that facilitates the work that we do together, and to understand the potential hotspots within the country, within supply chains overseas. It will always stay with me that that government and Kevin Highland, one time the way that I met him was on TV, because he was in a country in Africa with the villagers of that particular town that were being trafficked into Europe. And the work that it was done by developing awareness, that is something that we really want to do as business, tackling the issue in the community and working with the government locally, the government that provides labor to other countries, is absolutely necessary. And that will be a question, a request that I have there, a government-to-government understanding and setting that framework that is so critical for business.
Great, thank you. Now let us hear from Rowan and Tim from the trade union NGO perspective. What do you want to see governments to do? Whoever wants to go first.
Thanks, Beata. Well, I think we're in well, at least speaking for the global unions, we're in full agreement with our colleagues from the business sector here, in that we are seeing a clear trajectory towards corporate supply chain accountability, be it mandatory due diligence or mandatory transparency, or indeed when it comes to public procurement. And here governments play a major role in global supply chains, mandatory due diligence when it comes to public procurement as well. While we certainly think these developments in the United Kingdom, France, Australia and elsewhere are very positive, we would call for tighter legislation, arguably legislation that has an extraterritorial reach, perhaps. Why not talk about the seizure of confiscation of goods by customs agencies if companies are non-compliant with their obligations? I mean, these are areas that we'd like to see governments taking. And I also think, as I highlighted earlier, we do see these governance gaps, and one thing that national governments can certainly do is to adopt legislative measures to establish and apply legal liability of companies under their jurisdiction for any forced or child labor violations resulting from these companies' activities throughout their operations, wherever these violations might occur. So this again encompasses the extraterritoriality element. Certainly, enforcement is key, and again here we're talking about public policy approaches which governments need to take, investment in labor inspectorates, the regulation of third-party auditors, focusing on the transition from the informal to the formal economy. I mean, recommendation 204 is key in all of this. And there's certainly loads more that governments can do. But just to conclude on this point, in that, the elephant in the room, of course, and, Marcela alluded to this earlier, is the fact that, we're talking about $150 billion in illicit profits generated from modern slavery. This is the root of the problem, the fact that forced labor and child labor pays. And that is a problem that needs to be addressed, and this has to be done in a holistic way, looking at issues of tax justice and trade justice, among others. Therefore, well, governments are certainly doing a lot of good. but there's a lot more they can do, and we will be there as willing partners to assist in this journey. Thanks.
Thank you, Warren. So a lot more governments can do. Tim, would you agree? Just a few words?
Certainly.
Briefly.
I think there are a lot of things that governments can do. I think there is a real issue, some of the issues of transparency have been touched on already. I just want to make one particular point, which I think is of great concern today to civil society organizations and trade unions alike. And that is, you may have a government that is lax in enforcement of their law or lacks the resources to enforce their own laws. That's understandable. There is a problem of enforcement across the globe in terms of labor law. The key is the enabling atmosphere for workers and communities to be able to organize and empower themselves. And when you have a situation where governments put roadblocks in the way of those organizations and those people to be able to organize themselves, it's not just a question of enforcement of the law, it's a question of basically obstructing the implementation of the law. We see this in the trade union movement all around the world, where trade unions are prevented from forming by a variety of means. And more broadly speaking, I think it's no surprise to people in this room as we look at, in general, around the world and in many different countries, many different regions, and for maybe different local reasons, a real constriction and closing of civil society. To the extent that those voices are being muted and they're being constrained, this is going to actually, and it will have a real impact on the ability of the most vulnerable of communities and workers to be able to organize themselves. So this is a key thing that governments need to be aware of in terms of, if they're serious about tackling these issues of the most vulnerable, closing space for civil society organizations to be able to help empower those workers is a real issue.
Thank you. So I think we heard a number of really important proposals. So let us now turn back to governments again. And peut-être I'll start with you, Monsieur Ministre, from Côte d'Ivoire, because I think in Côte d'Ivoire you've taken some very interesting legislative initiatives, but also when you look at the cocoa supply chain in particular, there's this challenge of intermediaries, small, medium-sized companies. How do you get them through regulatory measures?
Merci. Disons qu'au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire, par rapport à la lutte contre le travail des enfants, nous avons eu beaucoup de chance. Nous avons eu de la chance parce que le président de la République lui-même a érigé ce combat-là en priorité haute pour la Côte d'Ivoire. Le gouvernement l'a suivi dans cette pratique et la première dame, c'est-à-dire l'épouse du président de la République, au lieu de faire comme généralement les autres premières dames dans d'autres secteurs, a choisi la lutte contre le travail des enfants comme une priorité à son niveau et est devenue aujourd'hui l'égérie de cette lutte contre le travail des enfants, au point qu'elle préside elle-même le comité national de surveillance de la lutte contre la traite, l'exploitation et les pires formes de travail des enfants. Et c'est elle qui a engagé toutes les premières négociations, comme vous le savez vous-même, avec le BIT, avec l'US-DOL, avec tous les congressmen aux États-Unis. Et elle continue à nous soutenir dans ce combat. Au niveau du gouvernement, nous avons fait un choix. Nous avons fait le choix d'abord de la prévention. Nous avons fait ensuite le choix de la sensibilisation, de la répression. Nous avons fait le choix de la protection des enfants contre l'exploitation et les pires formes de travail des enfants. Mais nous avons fait aussi le choix d'améliorer les conditions de vie des ménages les plus vulnérables parce que la pauvreté aide beaucoup à cela. Et nous avons choisi de prendre en charge tous les enfants qui sont victimes à travers un certain nombre de choses. La première chose, ça a été le renforcement de la collaboration avec l'ensemble des parties prenantes. les parties prenantes s'entendant autant des patrons du patronat que des travailleurs, c'est-à-dire des syndicats. Donc c'est gouvernement, syndicats et patronat ensemble qui menons cette lutte à ce niveau-là. Et je vous ai dit tout à l'heure que, par exemple, dans l'industrie dans le cacao et l'industrie du chocolat, nous avons des initiatives donc, du secteur privé qui nous ont aidés, par exemple, à accompagner 80 communautés. Et c'est beaucoup. Et cet accompagnement-là a permis d'améliorer le système scolaire, mais aussi d'améliorer le système routier et d'autres éléments de prise en charge sociale. Ça peut être une maternité, ça peut être un centre de santé. Et tout cela est important pour nous. Et je vous disais également que dans ce que nous avons fait, nous avons choisi de renforcer le cadre juridique. Et par exemple, pour renforcer le cadre juridique, cette année, en avril, nous avons passé des arrêtés. Un arrêté, par exemple, qui précise clairement ce que c'est la lutte contre les pires formes de travail des enfants. Quel est le travail qui est considéré comme entrant dans les pires formes de travail des enfants et quel est le travail qui est considéré comme travail socialisant. Nous avons fait un deuxième arrêté pour dire quel est le travail qu'un enfant peut supporter selon l'âge qu'il a. Et cela, nous pensons que ça nous a fait avancer également. Nous avons également choisi, à l'appui du plan d'action qui existe actuellement et qui va jusqu'à 2017, de lancer un nouveau plan national d'action 2018-2020 de lutte contre la traite, l'exploitation et le travail des enfants. Nous avons aussi décidé d'accompagner ceux qui sont les plus faibles d'entre nous à travers une couverture maladie universelle dont nous avons déjà lancé la phase expérimentale et qui en 2018 va rentrer en phase de généralisation. Nous avons également lancé le programme des filets sociaux productifs. Alors, je voudrais m'arrêter une seconde sur ce programme. C'est un programme dans lequel les indigents reçoivent 36 000 francs CFA. 36 000 francs CFA, c'est-à-dire environ 5 à 6 $ par trimestre pour les accompagner à se relever par rapport à la faim, par rapport à la scolarisation, par rapport à la santé et les aider à se relever à travers des activités génératrices de revenus pour que demain ils ne tendent plus la main, mais qu'ils nous aident à aider d'autres qui tendent la main. Nous avons également choisi de passer du secteur informel qui est énorme dans nos pays et qui entretient justement le travail des enfants, de passer, de lutter contre ce secteur informel en augmentant la part du secteur moderne. Le secteur informel, pour tout vous dire, actuellement c'est presque 90%. Donc à travers la couverture maladie universelle, à travers la protection sociale qui nous permet, par des méthodes très modernes, y compris la numérisation, d'enregistrer tous ces gens-là, nous avons choisi de lutter également au niveau du secteur informel en faisant en sorte que ce secteur se formalise de plus en plus. Et à ce niveau, par exemple, nous leur avons proposé une assurance vie. Donc nous allons généraliser l'assurance vie actuelle et la protection à ce niveau-là de l'assurance vie et de l'assurance retraite. Nous avons décidé d'étendre ça au secteur informel. Donc nous attendons en 2018 de voir comment ils vont réagir, parce qu'une fois qu'ils seront répertoriés à ce niveau-là, ils auront du mal à continuer d'être totalement informels. Nous avons également décidé d'engager une politique d'autonomisation des personnes vulnérables et particulièrement des femmes. C'est ainsi que la Première Dame a mis en place un fonds d'appui aux femmes au niveau des activités génératrices de revenus. Mais le gouvernement lui-même aussi a créé des fonds de garantie pour accompagner ceux qui veulent engager des activités génératrices de revenus, que ce soit des jeunes ou que ce soit des personnes du troisième âge ou des gens qui ont passé l'âge de 35 ans. Nous avons également un programme d'animation communautaire et le système d'observation et de suivi du travail des enfants. Tout ça pour vous dire que nous avons engagé beaucoup de choses à la fois pour améliorer notre système. Et à travers tous ces engagements, notre souhait est précis. Nous voulons améliorer l'employabilité de nos enfants et de nos jeunes. Nous voulons favoriser leur insertion dans la vie active. Nous voulons, à travers ça également, promouvoir plus de solidarité, de cohésion sociale et promouvoir le vivre ensemble. Et nous avons également choisi de faciliter la mise en œuvre de toutes les initiatives visant à mieux protéger les enfants et à leur donner un avenir qui soit meilleur. Nous avons choisi aussi, à travers ça, en faisant en sorte que les indigents, les femmes et les enfants, qui sont nombreux, participent à l'économie. Nous voulons réussir à travers ça le défi de l'émergence de notre pays et le défi également d'un développement durable pour notre pays. Voilà un peu, si vous voulez, ce que nous avons déjà engagé et que nous continuons d'engager avec les partenaires, qu'ils soient au plan national ou qu'ils soient au plan sous-régional, régional et même au plan international, comme vous l'avez constaté avec vous-même, avec l'OMS, avec l'UNICEF, etc. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I think this presentation gives us a good idea of the wide scope of government action. It's not just legislation or enforcement, it's actually also prevention. And your emphasis on women's empowerment, I think that's really important to highlight, because we've seen in our research that children are less at risk of child labor if their mothers are economically active and empowered. So that's very encouraging. You'd like to please.
Merci beaucoup. Et excusez-moi, je n'ai pas parlé tout à l'heure de l'éducation parce que j'en avais déjà un peu parlé et je ne veux pas me répéter. Mais ça fait partie de nos éléments pour relever nos enfants et leur donner un avenir. Merci beaucoup.
Bien entendu. Thank you very much. Let's continue with governments. Mrs. Kammer, can we hear more about Germany? What are you doing in particular to encourage compliance of companies domiciled in Germany and the action plan that you have adopted?
Zunächst einmal verfolgen wir innerhalb von Deutschland Branchenansätze. Und es gibt da sehr unterschiedliche Ansätze. Beispielsweise gibt es eine Initiative aus dem Bereich der Privatwirtschaft, dem Bereich der Chemie. Aber ich denke, für Deutschland kann man insbesondere das sogenannte Textilbündnis hervorheben. Besonders im Textilsektor sind natürlich nicht zuletzt wegen der schrecklichen Vorfälle in einigen Fabriken zahlreiche Aktivitäten entwickelt worden. Unter anderem ist auf der Basis der Arbeit des Bundesministeriums für wirtschaftliche Zusammenarbeit ein Textilbündnis zustande gekommen. Und bei diesem Textilbündnis handelt es sich um eine Multi-Stakeholder-Initiative mit rund 150 Vertretern aus 5 Akteursgruppen: der Bundesregierung, der Wirtschaft, Nichtregierungsorganisationen, Gewerkschaften, Standardorganisationen. Das Wichtige ist, dass dieses Textilbündnis seine Ziele immer stärker fasst, also sich selber immer höhere Ziele setzt. Diese Ziele werden überprüft und was ich denke in gleicher Weise wichtig ist, dieses Textilbündnis schafft es mittlerweile, 50% des Textilhandels in Deutschland zu erfassen. Und wir haben die Zielsetzung, dass wir bis zum Jahr 2018, also Ende des Jahres 2080, 18 sogar 75% des Textilhandels erfassen. Daneben existiert natürlich auch der nationale Aktionsplan. Der nationale Aktionsplan soll Unternehmen klar machen, was ihre Verantwortung ist. Und das unterteilt nach verschiedenen Zielsetzungen. Also sie sollen eine Grundsatzerklärung abgeben, sie sollen hiernach eine Risikoanalyse vornehmen und hiernach ein Risikomanagement einsetzen und, wie gesagt, Ziele überprüfen. Wir lassen die Unternehmen an dieser Stelle allerdings nicht alleine. Die Bundesregierung wird es sein, die solche Bündnisse moderiert. Ich denke, das ist extrem wichtig, die Initiative zu ergreifen. Das ist das eine. Und wir geben unzähliges Informationsmaterial, Handlungsanleitungen an die Unternehmen weiter, sodass wir an dieser Stelle weiterkommen.
Very good, thank you very much. And again, a very good example of an industry-wide initiative, in this case, in the garment sector. Mr. Coel, in the European Union, we have, let's look again now at the regional level and see what we've just heard. Are these examples also relevant at the EU level? What are the latest trends we see?
Muchas gracias. Efectivamente, a nivel de la Unión Europea sucede lo mismo que a nivel de los países, que a nivel de las ONGs o de los sindicatos. El tema de cómo luchar contra estas malas prácticas es un tema que nos preocupa. Y la acción que se ha, digamos, acelerado en los últimos años se articula en torno a lo que yo llamaría tres ejes, ¿no? En primer lugar tenemos el eje coercitivo, por llamarlo así. Les voy a dar dos ejemplos de acción en este terreno. El primero es el reglamento europeo de lo que llamamos los minerales en conflicto. Sabemos todos que hay una serie de materias primas, de minerales, que vienen de países que están en conflicto. Se han hecho películas al respecto, como esta película que se llama Diamantes de Sangre, y lo que hace la Unión Europea es prohibir la importación de un número determinado de estos minerales siempre que vengan de países que están en conflicto, lo cual da la presunción de que efectivamente no se respetan las normas internacionales de trabajo y en concreto no se respeta la prohibición de trabajo infantil. Y este es un reglamento que es relativamente nuevo, pero que se adoptó en mayo de este año y esperamos que tenga impacto cuando empiece a aplicarse. Otro ejemplo de este enfoque coercitivo o punitivo sería toda la legislación europea en materia de contratación pública. Desde hace unos años, desde hace 3 años, para ser más concretos, hay reglamentación a nivel europeo que impone que todas las compañías que participan en concursos públicos, a los efectos de contratación pública, respeten las normas internacionales del trabajo, respeten concretamente los estándares fundamentales. O sea, este sería el primer eje de actuación. El segundo, que es importante, es el de la transparencia. Y aquí vuelvo a lo que decía Andrew Forrest antes de la visibilidad del problema. Y lo que la Unión Europea ha hecho es adoptar una serie de directivas, en concreto una del 2014, donde se determinan cuáles son las informaciones no financieras sobre las que deben informar las grandes compañías. Y esto incluye, hay por supuesto obligaciones de reporting financiero que son comúnmente aceptadas en todo el mundo, pero aquí hablamos de información no financiera. Y entre otras cosas, lo que tienen que hacer estas empresas que a partir de una talla determinada es informar, entre otros elementos, sobre su política de responsabilidad social y, muy importante, cómo tratan a sus empleados. Y gracias a esa información se puede saber efectivamente si las grandes compañías europeas respetan o no respetan, una vez más, las normas internacionales del trabajo. Pero todo esto queda cojo si no va más allá. Es decir, la ventaja que tiene, digamos, la Unión Europea respecto a los países individuales es que, por definición, es transnacional. Cubre una zona geográfica que va más allá de un simple país. Pero, obviamente, la Unión Europea no es todo el mundo. Y sabemos que las cadenas globales de suministro van más allá de la Unión Europea, tienen elementos que se producen en otros países. Y ahí quisiera una vez más estar de acuerdo con lo que decíamos antes, de que hay que ir más allá y pelear, digamos, o luchar o actuar en aras a una gobernanza global que sea más inclusiva, y que las obligaciones de diligencia de vida que se promueven desde la OIT, desde Naciones Unidas, desde la OECD, etcétera, que sean realmente aplicadas y que se consiga a nivel mundial que se haga progreso en ese sentido. Y una problemática que me parece que es importante abordar es que este tema no puede ser solo un tema de países desarrollados. Cada vez más vemos que hay empresas en países en vías de desarrollo, en países emergentes, por decirlo de forma más precisa, que efectivamente son el origen de las cadenas de suministro global. Y es importante que consigamos que haya un esfuerzo colectivo para que, más allá de la acción de un país, más allá de la acción de una organización regional amplia como es la Unión Europea, se consigan crear normas que vayan más allá y que incluyan a todo el mundo. Y esas normas, repito, desde mi punto de vista, tienen que articularse en torno a el enfoque coercitivo, por un lado. Hay prácticas que deben prohibirse directamente y después otras que tienen que ser más en función de aumentar la transparencia para estar seguros de poder promover las buenas prácticas. Y esta es un poco la acción que hace la Unión Europea en este ámbito, y repito que es una acción muy reciente y que todavía no podemos medir los resultados. Perdemos esperanzas de que estos resultados estén ahí dentro de 2 o 3 años, cuando la legislación se haya aplicado durante un cierto tiempo. Muchas gracias.
Very good. Thank you very much. And really, thank you also for highlighting that this is not the responsibility of one government alone, but really it needs collaboration across countries. We've got a very interesting question here from the audience, coming back to the issue of transparency and reporting. So the question is, companies that take those reporting obligations seriously, they inevitably, of course, will report higher rates, or are likely to report higher incidents of child labor and maybe also forced labor. So are we doing enough to encourage companies to and reward corporate transparency on this issue? I think, Andrew, you at some point said, how can we celebrate that companies actually report on these issues and don't go into hiding?
Yeah, look, I can once again give you personal evidence. Where we discovered very major forced labour slavery in our own supply chains, the profits were being made by unscrupulous middlemen who were basically a net withdrawal from the economy, sucking the lifeblood out of the economy, and creating this distortion, which is absolute flagrant transgression of human rights. When we got rid of those practices completely within our own supply chains, the cost of our products did not increase at all. The quality might have increased slightly, but you could not have picked the cost. The cost was just as competitive. We just had ethical labour practices. And it comes down to something my colleague said: workers should never have to pay for their own jobs. You know, we all use recruitment agencies and we identify great workers, and we as employees pay them. It's only when workers start to get savagely exploited do they start paying for their own jobs with so-called very high interest loans. And this happens by the hundreds of thousands, ladies and gentlemen, indeed by the millions all over the developing world. And we formed an organisation of businesses, 34 businesses, and we became part of an organisation known as the Bali Process. Now, the Bali Process really does need mention here, because it's why we should all have hope, why we should realise that modern-day slavery and child labour is standing on the edge of its own extinction. But we need, ladies and gentlemen, we need to give it that push. And the Bali Process, an intergovernmental organisation by the Australian and Indonesian governments, pulled together 45 countries, in fact invited 45, 43 came. It was a bit hard to get North Korea to come along. Most of the countries enslaved, they weren't that happy about coming to an anti-slavery conference. And the other 43 economies sent their foreign ministers, sent their very senior ministers with businesses, and we signed an agreement together. Now, this is the biggest economic growth region of the world. It's where 63% of the world's people live, 75% of the world's slaves suffer, all in this massive region. And we collectively got together and we decided these three things. One, as my colleague has said, workers should never pay for their own jobs. We must do that as employees. Two, those organisations who practice good work ethic and good supply chain ethics do get singled out by their governments for recognition so that consumers can reward them with greater markets and shareholders and investors can reward them with higher market capitalisations. Reward companies, incentivise companies for doing the right thing. You might think, well, hell, shouldn't you do it anyway? But that would be sticking your head in the sand. We need to really encourage companies to break with the trend. And thirdly, of course, the most amazing thing I saw, these 43 countries all voted for their governments to lead their economies with transparency through modern slavery acts. It was amazing.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's turn over to other speakers from the business sector here. Didier, are companies of the consumer goods form rewarded if they report on forced labor?
Well, it's not a mega trend yet, but I think we can, of course, count on it. Actually, there is a Stop Slavery Award that has been set up by the Thomson Reuters Foundation in England, and I think it's for all companies, but the trend is that in 2016 only one company from our membership was actually applying for it, and this year there is 3 of them. So it's an exponential growth, but it's of course very little. It's just very complicated for consumer-facing companies to effectively speak about forced labor because it's a badly understood topic. So this is where I totally echo what Andrew was just saying. When it comes to the Modern Slavery Act, it really helped also the consumers to realize that, you know, their car washes, when there are 6 people washing their car and still supposedly being paid the minimum wage, there must be a problem. Same when it's 12 at night and you still have someone polishing your nails in a nail salon, there is a problem. So everyone has to be involved in this. Everyone has to realize where forced labor can lie. And I think that one great push towards transparency from a business perspective will certainly to work on informality, illegality, but also by simply putting the workers first. It's just very complicated because, you know, forced labor affects vulnerable people that are very afraid of also being seen as victims, because then the rule of law takes time to be applied and they actually fear of being deported because they're migrant workers. And because we don't put workers first, we struggle to identify victims of forced labor, but also to remediate their situation because, you know, it takes time to effectively take human traffickers in jail. Actually, I think the UN Secretary General was saying a couple of weeks ago that he sees many drug lords in jail. Unfortunately, he doesn't see any trafficking lord in jail today. And that's the reality. It takes much more time. The war on drugs has led to effective legal repercussions. So there is a real threat, there is a real fear. Today, we can seriously talk about the business of human trafficking and forced labor as being one of the most profitable crime, with 150 billion a year. So it's totally inappropriate. Last but not least, Andrew spoke about the Bali process. We totally praise these efforts because we speak about borderless workforce, and let's face it, let's embrace migration. It's a good thing for everybody, but it has to be same for everywhere, for everyone. Today, it's a bit same but different. It's like if I'm a sending country, I can charge recruitment fees, or if I'm a receiving one, I can also charge some recruitment fees. Then the worker gets trapped into this indebtment because middlemen, middle agents will effectively benefit from this lack of harmonization amongst governments, and of course charge workers far more than they should. So the reality is that intergovernmental action is not only necessary, it's vital, but again we need borderless regulations. For us, the simplest the better. for us, the seafood sector is extremely interesting because the way you have to look at, if you fish there, but to export there, depending on the waters you fish the fish from and where you're going to actually sell it, then you have various legislations applying, notably to the worker and its working conditions. This is insane. Let's all agree on minimum standards like effectively the ILO pushes, but make sure that we are all same, but not same, but different.
Okay, thank you, Didier, and again highlighting the role of regulation. Marcela, there is a specific question here for Unilever. Someone in the audience would actually like to know whether Unilever has already succeeded in eradicating child labor from its value chain worldwide.
Great question, huh?
Can you say yes or no?
I doubt that we have eradicated forced labor in the very extended supply chain. And the reality, I mean, and this links with the question and the comments before, I mean, when Andrew said to you, I mean, and you know, I turned my company upside down to see if there was child labor, forced labor, is really what business must do and should be doing in partnership. I think that the more that we go into the extended supply chain, think about tier 2, 3, 4, it's the more difficult that it is to really address it. But the question before made me think about that there's no way to hide. I mean, we pretty much know where the problems are. We may not have all the details, we meaning the collective us, but I think that is a job that we need to start doing and doing it together, and that's what we are really committed to. I would like to say that we believe that there is absolutely no forced labor or child labor, but we believe that if it's in the world, there is a chance that touches supply chain. And if we have the amounts of child labor and forced labor that have been addressed, certainly they are in the communities where we work. And in terms of the award that you were talking before, I was thinking about, you make me think about that. I think that the best award or recognition will be one of trust, not a recognition, a public recognition. And by that I mean that our partners, whether they come from civil society or the union movement or the government, reach out for us, to work with us in tackling issues in specific places where it's endemic in supply chain. So I think that, Beata, that will be the most significant award that we have, one of trust, that they believe that we are going to be doing always the right thing and working to eradicate this. Thank you.
Thank you. Marcela, Andrew, you wanted to comment on this?
Yeah, look, I do. I think I join all of you in this room when Beate prompted the question, is it yes or no? I was very interested in that answer, because if Unilever had answered yes, we have taken slavery out of our supply chains, child labour out of our supply chains, we all have a really serious problem. The presidents of countries and the presidents of companies who deny they have slavery are the best friend of the slavers and the greatest enemy of the vulnerable and the weak and the poorly represented around the world. It is those companies who deny they have a problem, those countries who deny they have slavery. You have all got slavery in your countries. Those countries and companies who deny it are those countries and companies who propagate it. So thank you for answering so honestly.
Thank you. So we have 11 minutes left, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to give all the panelists a chance for a final statement. And perhaps you can, in your statements, pick up one more question that we got, actually two more questions we got from the audience, particularly related to the informal sector, which is, as we heard also from the Minister of Côte d'Ivoire, Mr. Kwasi, it plays a key role in many countries, and some up to 90% of the people depend on jobs in the informal sector. So if you could also say, perhaps in your final statements, a few words about what companies can do to reach to the, and also trade unions, NGOs and governments to reach to the informal sector, And also I'd like to underline the important point we've made in this panel on the empowerment of workers so that they can claim a fair share of the wealth they have helped to generate. So who would like to take the floor first for a final concluding statement? Shall we start with perhaps our friends from the trade unions and from the Solidarity Center? Tim, please.
Certainly. I just have one very short statement to make in this regard that underpins, I think, a lot of the comments on the panel, but also comments I think that Ruan and I were talking about, and that is workers in an enterprise in a situation are the best monitors of the conditions under which they're working. They may not know the ILO standards, they may not know, higher international policy and so on, but workers themselves know what's going on in the places where they work. And when they're empowered to be able to form their own associations, their own trade unions, that's when they begin to be able to be agents for change, not only in a democratic context, but also in a broader development context, because we're talking about both politics and economics here. Thanks.
Ruan, can you take over from this?
I mean, it goes without saying that, that I share Tim's sentiments on freedom of association, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, as being an enabling right, and that to us is absolute foundation of all of this. Just a couple of points. I mean, I suppose I mentioned earlier about necessary legislative reforms at the national and international level, but one thing I did fail to mention is the importance of lifting the barriers to access to remedy for victims of child labor, forced labor, and this is another area where governments can make a real difference. And I'm not only talking about jurisdictional issues, but also issues concerning the lack of legal aid, for example. And the final point I'd make, I mean, because there was a question on transparency as well, is that, while we of course welcome the very progressive legislation coming out of countries like the UK, and indeed in the US in terms of the California Transparency Act, I think what we need to also focus on, and I think other panelists touch on this as well, is that we also need to not only talk about transparency, but how those risks are remedied. And, when we are at a point when under this legislation a company can comply by stating that they have not taken any action, then, that's not the place where we want to be. So we need to improve on that. That said, as I mentioned earlier, I do see a clear trajectory towards corporate supply chain accountability, and we can only build on what we have now. So there's certainly hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruan, and also for mentioning remedies. So maybe we can hear quickly. Yeah, please, Minister Kwasi, if you would like to make your final statement.
Oui, j'ai évoqué le secteur informel qui représente autour de 90% de l'activité de nos pays. Du coup, beaucoup de responsables disent que c'est un mal nécessaire. Mais je crois que c'est un mal qui n'est pas indispensable et qu'il faut l'aborder comme étant quelque chose qui lutte contre le travail décent. C'est quelque chose qui lutte contre la dignité des travailleurs parce que si vous voulez, chez nous, par exemple, par rapport au SMIC, le SMIC en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est 60 000 francs CFA par mois, c'est-à-dire environ 120 dollars par mois. Mais lorsque quelqu'un est dans le secteur informel, il sous-paye son travailleur et les femmes, par exemple, sont encore plus sous-payées que les autres travailleurs, et les jeunes sont également sous-payés par rapport aux autres travailleurs, même s'ils produisent la même quantité de travail. Ce n'est déjà pas juste. Et donc, ce que nous avons choisi de faire, c'est de proposer la couverture maladie universelle dans laquelle, en payant 1000 francs CFA par mois, on peut se soigner. C'est-à-dire, en payant un peu moins de 2 dollars par mois, on peut se soigner grâce à la solidarité. Mais en payant cela, on se fait identifier. Et le travailleur qui veut bénéficier donc de la solidarité de la nation est obligé de se faire identifier. En se faisant identifier, il nous aide à réduire la part du secteur informel. Nous avons également choisi, comme je vous l'ai dit, de développer le système de retraite et le système de maladie et de l'étendre au secteur informel. Mais là également, pour rentrer toutes ces données, il faut passer par une numérisation avec prise des empreintes digitales. Avec ça, il est difficile que quelqu'un qui a accepté de bénéficier de la solidarité de la nation, après, devienne informel. Lorsque nous avons travaillé sur la cherté de la vie, nous nous sommes rendus compte que certaines entreprises du secteur informel contribuent également à la cherté de la vie. Parce que lorsque vous décidez que les entreprises qui font telle prestation doivent bénéficier de tels avantages, ces entreprises-là, même du secteur informel, bénéficient des avantages, mais ne les retournent ni aux travailleurs, ni à la collectivité nationale. Donc, quelque part, c'est un problème et il ne faut pas s'en accommoder en disant c'est un mal nécessaire. C'est un mal qui peut-être sur l'instant est nécessaire, mais n'est pas indispensable dans la durée parce que si on ne lutte pas contre ça, on entretient une gangrène. Et nous ne voulons pas, en Côte d'Ivoire, et je termine, nous ne voulons pas de l'amitié de la lèpre et du lépreux, dans laquelle c'est toujours la lèpre qui ronge le lépreux. Nous ne voulons pas de l'amitié du cheval et du cavalier, dans lequel c'est toujours le cavalier qui monte le cheval. Il faut un peu plus d'équité, et c'est cette équité-là qui nous donnera plus de paix, un développement plus durable et une économie plus solidaire. Merci.
Thank you very much, Minister. Global equity. This was, I think, a very important point. Mrs. Kramer, can we hear also from you on these issues, informality, global fairness, some final reflections?
Ja, zum Thema internationale Fairness. In Deutschland gibt es einen Spruch, der heißt, immer erst vor der eigenen Haustür kehren. Und ich finde, das ist immer ein sehr, sehr wichtiger Politikansatz. Und zwar bedeutet er, dass natürlich zunächst einmal der Staat in seinem eigenen Handeln sauber sein muss, selber auf saubere Handelsketten, Lieferketten achtet. Dann ist er glaubwürdig und kann auch gegenüber Unternehmen kundtun, dass sie dementsprechend handeln müssen. Das ist ein erster Punkt. Und wenn ich vor der eigenen Haustür kehre, beinhaltet das natürlich, dass ich als Staat Unternehmen klare Maßstäbe vorgeben kann, was ich erwarte. Und wenn das befolgt wird, dann ist es wunderbar. Wenn es nicht befolgt wird, muss ich mir überlegen, wie ich gegebenenfalls zu Sanktionen komme. Wenn das alle Staaten in dieser Form machen, haben wir eine Menge gewonnen. Und wenn wir dann unser nationales Handeln international koordinieren, dann haben die Kinder dieser Welt eine reale Chance, vernünftig aufzuwachsen und ein Leben in Gesundheit und mit Bildung zu begehen.
Thank you very much, and I think this is a motto we can take forward. Vor der eigenen Haustür kehren. Mr. Correll, some final reflections from an EU perspective.
Sí, muy brevemente. Decir que efectivamente el problema del trabajo infantil y concretamente en las cadenas de suministro global no es un problema simple, es un problema polimórfico y requiere la actuación de todos los actores. Es decir, no puede ser un tema que sea resuelto solo por los gobiernos. Hemos visto que el marco es transnacional. No puede ser resuelto solo por organizaciones regionales. Hemos visto que va más allá de una región y sobre todo tiene que implicar a las partes sociales. Es fundamental que los sindicatos, las asociaciones de empresarios, las empresas individuales se empeñen en esta lucha contra el trabajo, contra el trabajo infantil. Y al final volver a decir lo que hemos dicho, yo creo, más de un panelista, es decir, que es un tema que nos afecta a todos como consumidores. Es decir, siempre que sigamos siendo capaces de adquirir bienes de consumo donde sabemos o sospechamos que ha habido intervención de trabajo infantil y que eso no nos repugne, no vamos a hacer nada. Es decir, hasta que no haya una toma de conciencia más importante de eso, que pasa por campañas de sensibilización, pasa por legislación coercitiva, como decía antes, pasa por acciones en favor de una mayor transparencia, pero al final somos nosotros, los individuos, los que conseguimos cambiar la sociedad. Y entonces, hasta que no tengamos muy claro que, aunque no lo veamos, esa lacra sigue existiendo y no actuemos en consecuencia, seguramente no haya mejoras fundamentales. Y repito que desde ese punto de vista, esta conferencia internacional tiene una importancia significativa en el sentido en que puede efectivamente elevar el nivel de concienciación sobre estas prácticas que debemos combatir todos juntos.
Gracias. Our time is running up, but I'm asking for a final, very executive statement from our private sector representatives. Marcela, please.
Thank you, Beata. We all have a responsibility, and it's a responsibility that we came here for, to work together. So for me, collaboration, finding the opportunities to really come together to do this is critical. We work very close with our unions and organizations like IUF to really tackle the issues preemptively and address the problems with civil society and with government, as I said before, for those action framework. Argentina, the G20, has a unique opportunity to continue the work that has been started. And when we look into responsible, sustainable growth, there cannot be such a sustainable, responsible, inclusive growth without the eradication of child labor and forced labor. So my plea is to make sure that we continue the work and that we anchor it in the agenda that is being handled right now by the G20. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. Thank you, Beata.
Thank you. Didier. 3 seconds.
3 seconds. Yeah, totally agree with Marcela. The G20 is a great opportunity. There should be no double standards when it comes to child and forced labor. If it's not okay here, it's not okay there. If it's not okay for me, it's not okay for anyone. So as said, let's make sure that the G20 upholds the 50 for Freedom campaign, for instance, and that everybody signs up to this protocol to the Forced Labor Convention. And as said, as we translated it, every worker should have freedom of movement. No worker should pay for a job. No worker should be indebted or coerced to work. And I think with that, we could solve 80% of the cases of forced labor worldwide. So let's work on that together.
Thank you. And I just come in here quickly. We just heard ratification of the protocol. Governments can still make pledges. We have already received more than 30 pledges, and I encourage all of you to think of the pledges which you can make on the last day of the conference, including private sector representatives, including workers' representatives and civil society. Last statement, Andrew.
Thank you, Beata. Hey, look, I think you've been a great audience. I really need to congratulate the ILO for putting senior business leaders and government ministers up on the same stage. I've been studying now slavery, watching the movements, watching what works and what fails for the last 7 years in the modern slavery world around the world. And what I know for sure is that government has as big a chance of ending slavery without business as business does without government. It hasn't got a snowflake's chance in hell. There's only one force powerful enough to end slavery in the world, and that's government and business working together. That's what we must do, and I thank the ILO for making this great start today.
So thank you very much, and I think a big round of applause for our panelists this afternoon. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for engaging in this debate, and please continue this discussion. We will have more events on this issue over the next 3 days. Thank you.